Thanks for showing up tonight. I know we had some capacity issues, so we appreciate you guys making the haul out here. All right, who came out here from the farthest away? Outside of the state. Anybody here from outside the state? Well, there's a hand. Don't be shy. Raise your hands. We're all friends and family here. Well, you're of course, our presenter raised his hand. There's no prizes or anything, so don't worry. This is just more for like my information. All right, so who here? First off, let's thank Airbits for hosting again tonight in this girl space. But so, as much as we like the fact that Airbits hosted, now they're called Edge Security, Edge Secure. So they rebranded, right? So let's thank Edge, okay? I know. Come on, a real round of applause. It's the same people. So I want to thank also Caleb for coming out tonight from Colorado, and he's going to be staying out here a week, so he'll be out tomorrow night as well, and I'll make sure that Andres gives a little plug on that. So he'll be around, so that means you should buy him dinner or drinks or something while he's here in town, right? So who here actually owns salt tokens? Nice. That's like 50, almost 50% of this crowd. So that's pretty good. I'm awesome. That's impressive. Who here has an Airbits or Edge? Well, you probably don't have an Edge wallet yet, but who has an Airbits wallet here? Cool. Who owns Bitcoin? Almost everybody. I love it. Okay. Who here owns Ethereum? Oh my God! Wow. Almost the whole room. That's great. So it seems like we have at least a lot of curious or interested people here tonight, which I'm sure that's why this thing filled up so fast, because now you have this wealth that you may not have had before, and you want to tap into it. So I think Caleb's going to help explain a lot around what is salt and how that's going to work, and how you can take advantage of that. So also, there's a lot of stuff going on right now. Obviously, the price has been all over the place. Bitcoin Cash, everyone's been talking about, and the good thing is, I'm not going to get into that tonight. There's enough drama. You can read about it on the internet and talk amongst yourselves, right? We'll happy to talk about it afterwards when we go down to the Oyster Bar on 6th and J, where our Edge Secure's CEO, Paul Play, has been talking with them for months, so they love to have us come down there and eat oysters, because they're only $1 a piece. So come down, hang out, grab another drink, and mingle and chat it up. So I am Chris Groshong, if you guys haven't met me. I run Coinstructive, which is a consulting firm that helps business development for startups in the space. So we do everything from helping a business get their head out of their ass to marketing, as well as early stage software development. So we do quite a number of different things. And the important thing is that you really need to educate these like C-level people so that they understand what they're getting themselves into, have no problem telling people, no, you don't need a blockchain, because it's not an answer for everything. Everybody's trying to fit a square peg into a round hole, and it doesn't work. So who here has invested in an ICO of some sort, one way or the other? Awesome. Okay, almost the same people that raised their hand for the salt token, how many people you bought salt before, during like a pre-sale? Okay, about a 10 to 12 hands, I think I saw go up. That's pretty good. So I just got back from New York last night, actually. I was at a conference called Wall Street, or Blockchain for Wall Street, and it was a bunch of suits. And it was mostly education for suits, and which is great. They definitely need it, because they should know what's going to cause their demise. So it wasn't a complete waste of a trip. There was a lot of good connections that was made, and I'm just glad to be back in San Diego. The weather is beautiful here. I hope you guys are enjoying it. And the one good thing, though, that I did learn while I was there is that it reconfirmed my understanding about what's happening in the next 6 months, which is, if you don't already know, there is billions of dollars that are sitting on the sidelines waiting to come in the form of funds, crypto funds. And they're all lining up, they're all getting their ducks in a row, and they're all sitting on big piles of cash. And they want in because they're running out of other things to make money in. And there's no place that you can get returns like you can in crypto. So without digging into that too much more, there's also a conference coming up Friday, tomorrow, and Saturday called the World Funding Summit in LA. I will be attending that. Anybody here going to that event? No hands. That's all right, that's LA. Screw those guys. So anyway, thank you all for coming, and that's pretty much it for all the announcements. Oh, last thing. So at the end of the event, or the end of tonight's talk with Caleb, and after questions are all done, we do a 60-second kind of like, you can come up and pitch what you're working on, as long as it's not a scam, or multi-level marketing, and just let people know what you're interested in, what you're looking for, where you need help, or how you want to get involved into the space. So it's really an open platform. We just don't want people to ramble on for minutes at a time, so I'll use my hook and pull you off side of the stage if you run too long. And without further ado, let's give a nice warm round of applause to Caleb Slade from Salt Lending.
Thank you, Chris. Thank you for organizing and inviting me to come out here. And again, let me just reiterate, thanks to the Edge Secure team. Let's give a round of applause for Edge Secure, not Airbits. No, I mean, I think people outside of the space really underestimate the importance of these sorts of meetups. You know, like I met all of my co-founders for Salt at the local Denver meetup. Actually, my co-founder and CEO, Sean, he hosted the meetup for a lot of years, started it, and that's actually where I met Paul from Edge, like probably 3 years ago. I'm not exactly sure when it was. It was a while ago. But a lot, like, we are building the future right now, all of us, and we're doing it in these sort of community environments where there's not a barrier to entry. You don't have to talk to a secretary to find out who's gonna like change the world tomorrow. And it's a really cool and exciting world to be in. So thank you guys all for coming out. I really appreciate your time and appreciate your attention. And I'm excited to meet all of you. And please come up and introduce yourself to me. Take my business card. If you have any questions or need anything from us, I'm the community director of SALT. So it is kind of my job to talk to everybody that wants to talk to SALT. So I would love to meet you. What I want to talk tonight about, I don't want it to just be like a, a sales pitch for SALT. I want to talk to you guys about the business and economic theories that me and my co-founders are operating on, and why we're doing SALT, why we think that we are going to be addressing an immediate market need, and why we're positioned to address the needs of the future market. In particular, I want to talk about debt. Right, that's the title. The title I think of that I told Chris the title of this talk is "Good Debt versus Bad Debt," and why blockchain assets are the perfect form of collateral. So my role, apart from being a co-founder, I'm the creative director and the community director for SALT, which means that as a creative director, I focused on like the branding and the way that SALT looks and the messaging of SALT, and then I take that messaging and I use it to try and build and maintain a robust community of members for around SALT platform. First of all, how many people know what SALT is and what we're doing? Cool, that's tons of you guys, that's awesome. That's really cool. So for those of you who don't know, SALT is a lending platform that lets its members use their blockchain assets like Bitcoin and Ethereum as collateral for a fiat currency loan. So like an example loan is you have $100,000 worth of Bitcoin, You put it up as collateral. We give you like, something like $70,000 in cash deposited straight into your bank account. When you repay that loan over time plus interest, then you get all your Bitcoin back. Right? And we'll get into why you would want to do that in a little bit. But first, I want to talk about debt, because as a community manager, one of the things I realized really quickly that a task that we had as a company is that we needed to recontextualize debt. Because I think in society generally, but particularly in libertarian circles and particularly in blockchain circles, debt is a four-letter word, right? It's bad. Debt is bad, right? And so I realized that a part of my task and our task as a company was to change the way and challenge the way that people think about debt. Because there is so much debt that is bad. I totally agree with you. There's all kinds of debt that is a bad vehicle, a bad financial product, but there's also good debt. And as an example of this, I want to kind of bear with me because it seems a little bit unrelated, but I promise there's a point. If I were to ask you, is fire good? Fire, bad. Ugh, fire. No, but fire can kill me, right? Fire can burn me alive. It can hurt me. I can get burns. Forest fires can destroy, like, California knows better than anybody. Forest fires can really mess stuff up. But at the same time, if you've ever lived in a climate other than San Diego, which seems to be perfect all the time, if you're in like Denver in the winter, fire keeps you warm, right? So it's kind of a hard question to answer. Is fire good or bad? And then on the other side, it cooks pizza, right? And I mean, because pizza, right? So, and then like if I were to ask you, is water good or bad, right? Obviously, we need water to live. It's pretty vital to life. But at the same time, it can be an incredibly destructive force, right? You can drown and die. It can destroy your house in a flood if you're in like, New Orleans or Houston or whatever. So really when it comes down to it, if you're asking the question, just like water and fire, is debt good or bad? It's a false dialectic, right? It's not good or bad universally or inherently. It is the context and the implementation of debt or water or fire that makes it good or bad. Right, so let's dive into this. First, what I like to call there's the good, the bad, and the ugly of debt. We're going to talk about those three things and what separates them and what is universal across all three forms of debt. What do we think of when we think of debt generally as a society, this notion that SALT is trying to challenge? I think on a micro level, we think of usury debt, we think of credit cards, we think of student loans that you can't declare bankruptcy from, we think of payday loans, we think of predatory lending, pawn shops, with crazy 1% a day interest that ends up being 1,000% annual interest rate. We see this whole paradigm of financial products that serve as a mechanism for enslavement almost, right? It is a tool of oppression, and it is almost this master-slave dynamic between the lender and the borrower. And if you get into debt, you become owned by somebody else. It's a tool of oppression for the wealthy and the poor. And that's absolutely true of a lot of forms of debt. I think that, we can all probably, in the past, I'd been in credit card debt, and it was really hard to get out of. It's built that way. It's built to milk you for as long as possible. What I would consider worse than bad debt, like the ugly debt, is bookies, loan sharks, shark loans. Here, borrow a shark. No, but like a loan shark, right? This is the ugly side of debt that can be really, really bad. But at the same time, I want to challenge this notion that good debt is an oxymoron, right? Because it does exist. There's a form of debt that wealthy people use, right? Why would a wealthy person use debt? I'll tell you, wealthy people use debt to build more wealth. And it's a different form of debt than the average consumer uses, right? And there's some very key differences between good debt and bad debt. How do wealthy people use debt? Well, let's say you have 10 real estate properties that are income generating, right? You don't just live off the income of those 10 properties. You borrow against those 10 properties, and then you buy 7 more properties, and now you have 17 properties that are generating income, and then you rinse and repeat. That's how you build like a real estate empire. Most wealth in this world is built through passive income, and a lot of that passive income is attained and garnered through leverage and through debt. That's the only reason wealthy people go into debt, and they do it because it's lucrative. So what separates good debt and bad debt, and what is the same across all forms of debt? Um, so one thing that all debt has in common is universally, this is true of everything, is that all debt is secured by something, right? All debt is backed by something. Um, Bad debt, like credit cards, student loans, payday loans, these debts that enslave people, they are secured by your future income. That's what protects the lenders. That's what the borrower says. I don't have money now, but I'm going to be making money in the future because I have a job. So that is what's guaranteeing this money that I'm borrowing from you, right? Why I call ugly debt, why it's so nefarious is because the security of a loan shark or a bookie's debt is your like body, your life, right? Like if you don't pay a loan shark, they're gonna at best break your kneecaps, and at worst they're gonna kill you, right? That's actually a really effective form of collateral for a borrower, right? You know, like it's actually pretty effective. It's understandable why they do it because it works. Um, if you look at good debt, good debt isn't backed by future income. It's not backed by your life or your body. It's backed by your existing assets. And that's a huge distinction and really important to understand if you're understanding debt on a wide scale. Is this idea that you can borrow against the wealth you already have. Now, traditionally, that is only a form of debt that's been available to the ultra wealthy. On a global scale, you're talking about the top 5% of wealthy people. And we might actually be included in that. Even if we're middle class in America, we're probably top 10, 5% of global wealth, right? But this is a form of debt that traditionally and historically has only been available to the very, very wealthy because there's only certain sorts of assets that you can borrow against. Okay, so there's this world of debt that's obviously bad, right? That's debt that really does have a lot of dangers, a lot of pitfalls for people if you're borrowing against just your future income. Why is it so ubiquitous that debt is based off the security? Well, it's because the security is what's directly indicating the risk mitigating or the risk factors for the lender, right? If everybody repaid every loan that they ever took, the average, interest rate would probably be, I would say 2 to 3% annually. But the problem for lenders is that not everybody pays, right? So because some people don't pay, they have to increase that interest rate to overcome the losses for when borrowers default, right? And the security that's backing these loans directly determines the risk that a lender is facing when they are deciding to give up their money for a period of time for more money later, right? That's why you go from that 2 to 3% maybe annually to something like a credit card debt, which would be, I don't even know what the cap is these days, like 30-something% annual interest rate. What's that? Is that federal? Is that the federal? Yeah, thank you. 29.99, right? But they even with like payday loans, they get around that, right? They like charge some of the fees. They do like daily interest rates. Like, yeah, crazy. Right, exactly right. Yeah. Really, Native Americans. Oh, thank you. I'm learning something new. So that's why the security of a debt really determines, in my mind, what is the difference between good debt and bad debt is the type of collateral that you have and what it is that is securing that loan, whether it's your future income, your body and well-being, or your existing assets. And this is like really getting to the crux of what Salt Lending is trying to achieve, right? We are built as a platform on this notion of asset-backed lending. And we want to say that for the first time in history, there is the perfect asset to borrow against, and that's blockchain assets. And it has some very unique qualities that make it distinguished and something that is unique and that we have never seen in the history of mankind. And I want to compare it with the two most common forms of collateral that are used in lending. And obviously, it's mortgages and auto loans, right? Those are the most common things that people borrow for, and the assets that are underlying these debts. So you might think, well, these are asset-backed lending, right? So why do lenders consider the borrower's income? Why do they consider a credit score when you are borrowing against a house, right? When you buy a house when you get a mortgage, you have to put a huge down payment down, And then you have, the loan to value ratio is probably, I think, like about 80% generally, typically. So why do they care what your income level is or what your credit history is if you have this asset that is more valuable than the principal of your loan? Should they even care if you have a job? Why does it matter? And same thing with a car. Why should they care? You're borrowing, $8,000 for a $10,000 car. If you don't pay it, they get that car. The reason that even with traditional historical asset-backed lending models, the reason that they still have to consider your future income and your past repayment history is because of an inherent deficiency in those forms of collateral, in those asset classes. If you're looking at a car, right? There's some really huge benefits to it, right? It's very transferable. It's typically somewhat fungible. And by fungibility, if you're unfamiliar, it means that one, 2005 Ford Explorer in decent condition is equal to another 2005 Ford Explorer in decent condition. It's the Kelley Blue Book value, right? The problem with cars is that they move, right? So if you're a lender and you're thinking, all right, well, this collateral is protecting my loan, it could be, it could be in Chile by the time I want to repossess it. And it's really difficult to check. Now that's getting easier with technology, but it's still an issue. But that's also one of the benefits, is that it's easily transferable. You don't have to live in the city that the car is from to benefit from it, right? You can sell it to more people than just the people that are near that car. That's untrue of houses, right? Houses, one of their benefits is that they stay put. It's not hard to repossess a house because it doesn't run away. It's always there. It's always in the same place. But at the same time, the market for housing is a little bit more difficult. It's not as fungible either, because one house of a certain square footage and a certain number of rooms and certain bathrooms, certain garage count, will be much less valuable or much more valuable than another house of the same square footage, same bathroom count, same bedroom count, same garage count, right? So that makes it a less adequate form of collateral. Now, let's compare that to blockchain assets, right? Something like Bitcoin. Blockchain assets have three qualities that make it the world's most perfect form of collateral that has ever existed. And it's that it's divisible, fungible, and transferable, right? You can cut a Bitcoin in half and not lose any of the value. Each one of those halves, it's really easy to cut in half too, right? You can cut it into 8 decimal places effortlessly. And each one of those units will be equally valuable. You don't lose any of the value. That's the fungibility of it. And the transferability of it is you can sell it at any time, 24/7, to a digital global market, right? That's huge. It's like if you think about what your mortgage rate would be, is if you ever defaulted, if your lender, your bank, could just come up and shave off your living room and not lose any of the value per square footage, and then sell your living room to a digital global market, right? So you can see that these characteristics of blockchain assets protect the lender, and if the lender is more protected, they have less risk, and then less risk translates to a lower interest rate and a better relationship for both borrower and lender. This is this form of lending that we want to bring about that is just as, if not more, beneficial to the borrower than the lender, because the risk is mitigated from the form of collateral that is protecting these loans. So one of the things that I'm most excited about, why I get really excited about what I do every day, even if it's like mundane tasks, like just answering emails on a Monday morning. It's not super exciting, but I try and the thing that I tell myself is you're doing something cool, is that blockchain assets have this amazing decentralized, distributed, democratizing effect, right? That we're building this technology that manages to protect loans using blockchain assets in an automated, scalable manner. And what that enables is that you can leverage $100,000 worth of Bitcoin, but you can also, with equal ease and lack of labor, you can leverage $100 worth of Bitcoin, which is something that this world has never seen, and because it's never had an asset like blockchain assets. So if you're a farmer in India and you have maybe $50 to your name, you might be relatively wealthy for your community. But there's not a lender in the world that is going to lend against $50 worth of assets because it's too expensive to do so. When you have a loan like a house, you have an entire team of bookkeepers and actuaries and collateral managers who are constantly monitoring the value of that asset that's underlying their investment. Right? With blockchain assets, it enables this scalability of wealth building debt. And that's what Salt, that's the philosophy behind Salt, is that there is good debt and that blockchain assets enable that good form of debt to be available and accessible to anybody regardless of your level of your wealth. Right? So let's kind of bring it more practical. If you're not already sold, if you're not drinking the Salt Kool-Aid already, why would you want to borrow against your blockchain assets, right? Your Bitcoin. You might say, I'm a holder. I don't ever want to sell it. Well, the reason you'd want it is if you need cash, right? If you don't need cash, then you probably don't need Salt. But if you do need cash, it's a great thing because think about Salt as an example. We did our, if you want to call it, it's not, we didn't call it an ICO, and it's because we don't think that's a good term. We didn't call it a token generation event either, but it was a membership sale, right? Our memberships are ERC20 smart contracts, and we did our sale, I don't even know how long ago it was. It was a while ago. At the time of sale, we did $44 million in sale. We haven't sold a single Bitcoin or Ethereum that we brought in from that sale, and yet we've been growing as a company and spending tons of money every single month. And the way we've done that is by borrowing against it, right? Through our network of lenders that we've been building up for our platform. And now, the revenues from our sale are worth about $80 million, right? And that's scalably, that value proposition is scalable whether you have $44 million worth of Bitcoin and Ethereum or whether you have $1,000 worth of Bitcoin and Ethereum. Right? When you leverage something, it doesn't trigger capital gains because you're not liquidating that asset. So when you sell Bitcoin, you have to pay capital gains tax. If it's short term, you get bent over. And if it's long term, it's a little bit better, but you're still getting bent over. But the biggest problem about selling an asset like Bitcoin, at some point, probably the reason you buy Bitcoin and Ethereum is because you want to at some point sell it, right? That's why else would you get it? You're not going to hold it for the, just the ideology of having this, new asset. You want to get something from it, but nobody that I know that has Bitcoin ever wants to sell it because of appreciation, right? It's a deflationary currency. It is this amazing thing that there's less of today than there was yesterday in the supply, and that's awesome. The problem is what I forget. I think it's oh man, somebody correct me if I'm wrong. I think it's called Groshong's paradox, maybe. It's where the better a currency is, the less people want to spend it. Right? And that's the problem with Bitcoin is it's such a good store of value and it appreciates so much that nobody wants to use it. Like in this whole debate, I mean, I'm not even going to get into Bitcoin Cash and Bitcoin, but this it's almost like, this trope of like, can you use it to buy a cup of coffee? Like, why would I want to buy a cup of coffee with my Bitcoin? It's going to be worth twice as much tomorrow as it is today. That's going to be a $12 cup of coffee by the time tomorrow rolls around. So what Salt is built on is this notion that if you have an asset that is appreciating, you don't want to spend, borrow against it in a loan denominated in a depreciating asset, like fiat currency, right? Because over time, that loan gets easier to repay, and the whole time, that asset that you have saved through debt is appreciating, right? Yeah, and that's kind of another kind of key element of Salt, our business theory, if you will, like the concepts that go into why we're doing what we're doing, why we think it has a lot of merit as a business, is this idea that there will always be this asset pairing in the world. Even in the world without fiat currency, there will always be an asset that you want to save, and there will be an asset that you want to spend. Right? And that's what Salt is built. So in the short term, we think we have a really great value proposition to people like you guys who have crypto. Right? Don't sell your crypto and still get some liquidity out of it. That's pretty cool, right? But in the long term, some people ask, well, what do you guys do when fiat's dead? Whether it's 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, I don't even know how long it's going to take. I think it will happen. What do we do then? Well, we're built as a blockchain agnostic mechanism for leveraging one asset and spending another. So we are built to adapt to a world where somebody wants to leverage their Bitcoin and borrow a transactional currency like Dash or Monero or Zcash, like an anonymous fast transaction currency. So that's where Salt is positioning itself to be 5 years from now in a world without fiat, is a world where people are leveraging one blockchain asset and spending another. And we think this has even more merit when you consider this undeniable trend and tidal wave of tokenization that's happening right now. If you look at, I once did this chart. like made this slide when we were like first starting Salt. You know, like a pitch deck slide, and it was like this infographic of all the things that are being put onto blockchains that are happening right now by companies actively as we speak. And on the bottom end, as far as from asset class, you look at like things as insignificant seeming as appliance servicing contracts. Both IBM and Samsung are putting appliance servicing contracts on the blockchain because it is a nightmare of chaos. This whole system, like if you buy a brand new fridge or a brand new dryer and it breaks down, they'll try and fix it once. If it doesn't fix, they'll just give you a new one because it's such a inefficient system of guaranteeing these things. So they're putting that on the blockchain. Really cool. That's a small asset class. It's a couple $1 billion. It's a small asset class compared with what else people are doing. Putting diamonds on blockchain, gold on blockchain, everything from reputation to identity, derivatives. That's like I think cash derivatives and equity swaps is like a multiple quadrillion-dollar industry. And all these industries are going to be disrupted because they're moving from private centralized ledgers into public distributed blockchain ledgers. Some of them are privatized, some of them are permissioned. But the world of value, anything of value in 5 years, I believe, is going to be on a blockchain. I think the world of private ledgers is done. It's dead, right? Or it's on its way out. It's in its death throes. And in that world where everything of value, whether it's your time, your reputation, your identity, once it's on a blockchain, Salt is built to leverage it or spend it being borrowed against something else. Cool. Well, that's kind of all I have to say about the theory of debt. I hope you agree with me that there is good debt and there's something worth, worth using to build your own wealth, whether it's on a small scale or on a large scale. I know that's pretty quick, but I really just wanted to open it up to some questions. I'm sure some of you guys have some questions about Salt. And thank you for listening. Appreciate it. Clap, clap.
All right, we're going to start in the back.
Yeah. We're going to start in the back.
Does Salt have any competition? Is there any other currencies, cryptocurrencies doing this?
You mean cryptocurrencies doing the same? You mean just like the Salt currencies or whatever?
Yeah.
It's not a currency, but
yeah.
Yeah. So there's after we had a lot of success, we saw kind of a sprout up of about 5 or 6 kind of clones. In some instances, they slightly modified some of our language. Some instances, they didn't even change the colors or the branding. They just swapped some words out and like cloned our website. Which honestly, it's like it irritates you, but then you think, it's a compliment. Really, it's like imitation is the best form of flattery. But there are a coin loan, I think, is one of them. There's other ones that are doing something similar. ETH Lend is, I think, I've heard one. And then there's another company out of Austin, Unchained, yeah. But they're not really. I mean, I'm not poo-pooing anybody. I applaud competition, even though I think Salt is going to crush them. But I'm biased. But there's I think what Salt is unique is we are an industry leader using blockchain solutions to enable this sort of loan. That are when you borrow against an asset, what's happening is you're taking Bitcoin and you're funding a smart contract that's multi-signature architecture. So you as the borrower, you fund it, and if that lender doesn't deposit money into your bank account, then your money gets returned, your Bitcoin gets returned to you. And that's really what's unique about Salt as a technology. Is we're not just lending against blockchain assets. We're building a blockchain solution to lend against blockchain assets. And what's unique about us, and also the challenge, I think, and the greatest barrier to entry for competition, is that we're building a technology that is a catalytic bridge between the world of blockchains and the world of banking infrastructure. We're like a smart contract on steroids because we're not just reading blockchain information. We're reading blockchain information and we're reading the banking infrastructure. We're plugging in the banking infrastructure and we're using all those exterior factors to enforce a variable or modifiable loan terms of a smart contract that enforces the loan terms, right? Like the interest rate and the loan to value ratio that has to be maintained. So I don't think, as far as that's concerned, I don't see any viable competition for us. But I don't know everything that's going on in the space. Frankly, it's like I think there's like probably like 5 ICOs happening a day, or there's 5 new companies. So one of them, or 5 of them, or a dozen of them could be doing what we're doing, and I'm sure people are. But yeah,
Thank you.
yeah.
Can you give us an example of rates? What are the interest rates, and what are the loan to values you like to keep if so much is fluctuating all the time?
Absolutely, it's a great question. So I said blockchain assets are the perfect form of collateral because of 3 qualities, right? The divisibility, fungibility, and transferability. The one thing that has restricted them from being lent against is the volatility. That's exactly what Salt, that's our secret sauce, really. And I should have talked about that. I apologize. I probably skipped that part. But how we address volatility is the smart contract maintains a loan-to-value ratio, which is set by the lenders, right? A lender comes to the platform and they say, I'm willing to lend against this asset at this interest rate with this loan-to-value ratio, right? So what happens I'll address a couple questions. I think there's a couple factors there. So I'll address the volatility first. What happens when, let's say you start with, let's say 70% loan-to-value ratio? What happens if the day after you make that loan, you originate that loan, that value drops, let's say 15%, right? So the contract is built to maintain that loan to value. It keeps that loan to value, the LTV, calibrated. So what happens is if it drops a little bit, nothing really happens. But if it drops a little bit more, where it's like kind of threatening that threshold, then it creates a maintenance call, and it automatically alerts the borrower through every form of contact that we have, SMS, email, phone call, everything, right? We'll Facebook message you if you want us to. We'll say, hey, you as the borrower have 3 options. This is a maintenance call. This happens in securities-backed lending. It happens in a lot of asset-backed lending where the asset is volatile. You have 3 options as a borrower. You can put more collateral in. You can make an extra fiat currency payment, both of which would recalibrate that loan-to-value ratio. Or you can do nothing, and the smart contract will automatically shave just enough off of the collateral and liquidate it to recalibrate that loan-to-value ratio, right? So what's unique is we're harnessing that divisibility of this asset. So unlike a house where you can't sell just a part of it, unlike a car, you can't just sell the back tire, and it still be a good car. You can do this incremental liquidation to protect the lender, and still you don't lose the entirety of your investment. Right? Unlike a house, if you could get 29 years into your 30-year mortgage and then default, and they will take your house and they will take every single dollar you've invested into that. You lose everything. With blockchain assets, it enables us to not have to liquidate the entirety of the value drops. We liquidate just enough to maintain that loan-to-value ratio, which protects the lender. The same thing happens if you miss a payment. This is really cool. I think this is awesome, right? If let's say you have $100,000 worth of Bitcoin, and you leverage all of it. You borrow as much as you can against it, and then you take that. It's a non-purpose loan, so you can do whatever you want with it. It's what's that? Exactly. So let's say you buy more Bitcoin with that, right? And then the price drops, right? And you're leveraged to the gills. You don't have any more liquidity. You're insolvent, so you can't pay it. So you miss a payment. The same thing happens as if you ignore a maintenance call. We just shave that payment off the top of the collateral, give it to the lender on your behalf, and then the loan keeps rolling, right? Like nothing happened. And what's really interesting about this is because it's a perfect form of collateral, because we don't have to consider the borrower's payment history or credit history or income, we don't report to credit agencies. We don't check your credit before we give you a loan. All we do is review the collateral, because the collateral is so perfect that's all we need. That's all the lender needs to protect their investment. Oh, and then interest rates. You asked about interest rates, right? So I can't tell you exactly right now how much the interest rates are going to be, or even the loan-to-value ratio, because we're launching in December, and the rates are set by lenders. And as much as we all believe in this asset as being, Jesus on the blockchain or whatever you want to call it, like the world savior, lenders are still a little suspicious. So they're going to be way more conservative than we think they're going to be a year down the road. But what we're creating is a competitive market environment where lenders are competing against each other to deploy funds.
Do you have, to go along with that, what about terms? like length of contract? Is that
Terms.
is
Yeah.
that also something that the lender set?
So the lender sets the maximum term length, but the borrower sets how long they want to borrow for. So I think when we launch, we're planning on doing up to 3-year terms. Actually, when we launch version 1 in December, just to be full disclosure, it's probably going to be much more conservative loan-to-value ratios and much shorter terms, probably year-length terms. But we have to, like the former question, who's competing in the space? Nobody's really done this before. So we have to prove the model both to the traditional banking world and to other lenders. So we expect it to start out much more conservative, and we want it to start out more conservative. The good thing, the upside for the borrower is even if you have like a 10% loan-to-value ratio, that's not optimal. It's pretty conservative, really conservative. You're not losing any of the value of your collateral. You're just getting less liquidity out of it, right? But you also repay less liquidity. So when we launch in December, it's going to be much more conservative loan-to-value ratios. We expect when we're fully up and running it from talking to the lenders in our network, we expect it to be between 10 and 12% is what we've been kind of feeling out. We kind of really have to get out there and prove that prove that it works first. I think so. We got the mic passing. I think we're going to be coming forward. So I don't want you to have to hold your hand up every time, but in between questions as we're moving forward, I think we'll get there.
So I have a question. When
Yeah.
you design this, is it more for consumers or institutional entities? And the reason I ask that because it sounds like what you're creating, the Chicago Mercantile Exchange will be doing the same thing. And when you try to do a call for the repayment of loan, it sounds like a margin call. And going off what the guy said before is like he can borrow against what he has to buy more Bitcoin. So a big institution who has $1 million, $2 million, $10 million worth of Bitcoin has more power to buy even more or other assets to increase their stake in cryptocurrencies. And then if you do a margin call, yeah, they can afford to keep paying into that. So that might make smaller consumers the inability to actually compete against something like that. So that's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, did you design it for consumers or big institutions?
It's a great question. So we designed it to be competitive on the lender side, but not to be competitive on the borrower side in the same way. Now there is a competition because our bottleneck is definitely on having enough capital to lend. The demand that we have far outpaces what we'll be able to address even in the near term. Like I think we have 25,000 people who are members now. Huge number, right? And when we came out of stealth mode at Consensus Invest in May of this year, we had people walking up to our table, legitimately straight face asking for $100 million loans. We're like, no, we can't do that. No, that's crazy, right? So there is a competition on the borrower side, but we are designed to be, like I said, just as viable one with $100 worth of Bitcoin as it is to lend it with someone like an ICO with $20 million worth of cryptocurrency. Now, how we address that is through what's I think it's the technical term is like a feeder fund, right? So when you're a lender, you could, let's say you bring $10 million to the table, that might be distributed over 100 loans, right? If you have one big loan as a borrower, you might be funded by 20 different lenders, right? So it's not that so it's in how we distribute those loans as a centralized platform to say, all right, you as a borrower, you get a loan, right? But really the fact is we could deploy, and I please don't quote me on this because it's not a firm number, but I think the amount of money we could deploy if we just opened up the floodgates and served every borrower that has addressed or given us or a measurable demand, I think it's in the billions, right? Probably in the first quarter because of how many people want to use this service, right? So I think that's a good problem to have. But our plan is like, let's say a year down the road when we are fully functional and all of our features have been really thoroughly tested and vetted and we have more than enough liquidity on the lender side because we've proven the model, we've proven that our technology actually does protect lenders, and we have a relatively deep pool of funds. We're going to be lending to both individual borrowers and institutions alike. We're not going to only favor institutions. Does that answer your question? Yeah, I mean just to continue this, because I think it's a totally valid concern, right? Like why, like we built this platform, and why don't we just serve the big dogs, right? Really, we know that if we're going to be here in 10 years, which we plan to be, we can't do that. It just doesn't work, right? We have built this platform and are building this platform with the help and contribution and dedicate and trust of everybody in this community, and this is who we want to serve, right? This is our goal, our ethos, our philosophy as a company. So yeah, that's the best answer I can give. We're not planning on only serving the brokerages of the world, the hedge funds, the mutual funds, the ICOs of the world. We're planning on serving consumers as well.
If the conservative lenders are the limiting factor, is there any consideration for doing peer-to-peer lending or getting other lenders involved?
Absolutely, that's a great question. So the only thing keeping us from doing peer-to-peer lending, it's not the technology. Technology exists and we can build it very easily. The only barrier is regulatory issues, right? So in order to do a true peer-to-peer lending platform like Lending Club or SoFi, you have to have what's considered it's called an ATS, an alternative trading system. The regulatory framework that we are going to be launching in is broker dealer, right? So it's a sequential path, really. You can go straight to an ATS, but there's broker dealer. The capabilities of broker dealer are a little bit less than an ATS. So this is the path that we're on and totally plan on being. When we launch, we can only accept accredited investors and licensed institutions. So if you're an accredited investor or if you're a mutual fund, family office, hedge fund, bank, we recently announced our partnership with the State Bank of Mauritius. These are the type of institutions and lenders that we can accept at first, not because we don't want to accept the average consumer's money, but because of the regulatory hurdles, and it's actually really, really challenging. I won't get into the gripes about regulation. I understand why they're there, as difficult as they are to deal with. But that is definitely on our roadmap, and our plan is as soon as possible we are going to be a peer-to-peer lending platform, because really it's if you open it up, like the average consumer with some money to lend no one can compare to a mutual fund or a hedge fund, the funds that they have. But if you combine the aggregate amount of capital that could be lent through something like that, it's huge. And if you can, then you compare it to a SoFi or a Lending Club, where as a consumer lender on those, the biggest risk is you don't get repaid, which happens a lot, right? So all these loans are over collateralized, over secured by the perfect form of collateral. We think that it's going to be an incredibly attractive proposition for the average lender with some fee, or the average consumer with some extra fiat that they want to put to use and deploy. Ooh.
Hi, there's been some chatter on Telegram and Slack about you guys possibly moving to a proof of stake. I was wondering if you could comment on that.
So the chatter about proof of stake, we're not moving to a proof of stake. The chatter about the stake is a incentivized staking program that we are planning on launching, but we can't release details of it yet because of, again, regulatory compliance issues. I don't know if you guys are in on any of our social channels, but if you are, you'll feel like it's I think somebody said this is North Korea. It's just and there's a really good reason for it. And it's not our preference that we lock down all kinds of conversations. This ties into your question, I promise. The issue is that we're trying to, like I said, we're trying to stand in between the world of blockchains and the world of banking infrastructure. So for me as a community manager, community director, I have a incredibly long list of things that I cannot say, because there is this $600,000 fine gun to my head at all times. Because if you create an expectation of profit, or if you create an expectation of speculative value, or if you let anybody, or if you tell anybody, or let anybody else say that it's an investment, or all this whole crazy thing, then you run the risk of being shut down, frankly. And we don't want to get shut down. We want to be here 10 years from now, and we want to plug into the banking infrastructure. We're not trying to disrupt the regulatory model. We're trying to comply with it because it's the requirement if you want to serve the need that's immediate. Similar with the staking thing, we would love to have launched our staking program, before we did distribution of Salt. But we on advice of counsel and compliance officers, decided that it was more prudent to wait until we had a little bit more guidance. The problem is that we are in this we're in a pitch black room and we're blindfolded and there's landmines everywhere and we're trying to find our way to the door, right? But regulators won't tell you where the landmines are. If they told us where the guidelines were, we would be great. You know, we would love it. We want the SEC and CFTC and FINRA to come out with very, very clear, even if they're strict, we want them to come out with guidelines because then we would know what we can and can't do. But right now, because there's no clear guidelines, like that was the most disappointing thing about the SEC report is that they didn't say enough, right? So what we find is, I mean, not actually, but pragmatically, we can't move at all because we don't know where there's going to be a landmine because there's no precedent set because it's such a new thing. Even the regulators don't know where that precedence is going to land. So we're in conversations with regulators all the time, and we're just begging them, like, tell us what we can and can't do. And they're like, we'll just wait until you mess up, and then we'll tell you what you can't do. And so I was like, if you are in our social media or social channels like Telegram and Slack, from the bottom of my heart, I am sorry that it can't be a more open discourse, more open dialogue, but that's our motivation. We're not trying to censor, we're trying to stay in business, right? So that's the deal with the staking. It's not proof of stake though.
This is on that note of Slack, Discord, Bitcoin Talk, any of those programs. My cost per customer in my industry is about $500, and it's really hard to hang on to a customer. My ultimate goal is to get a phone call or face-to-face. Does anybody in the industry plan on having a customer support? It seems like it's been adopted as to let everybody just say what they want to say in a mass confusion state.
Absolutely. Actually, you can email support@saltlending.com. There is a phone number. We are. Yeah. Salt. Yeah. It's on our website. If you go to contact us, you can either email through that form. I know. I honestly think I don't know of any other blockchain companies right now that have a phone call. You can call and you can ask for Caleb. You guys have a phone? Are you serious? Yeah. Look at us leading the industry edge. Let's give us a round of applause. Woo! Woo! No, so on a personal note, not just personal, but professional, like something I'm focused on is this is under my purview. This is something my team is. I think that is our biggest opportunity for competitive advantage in this space. This is just a de facto understanding that if you are using a blockchain company, the customer service is gonna suck hard. You know, like it's just like, oh, Poloniex, they don't answer their support tickets. Oh, Coinbase, they don't get back to you. And it's like, this is our for me, I tell my team this every day, and I love my team. They're doing such a good job. They're dedicated. They work really hard, and they deal, I promise, the crazies in the blockchain space are crazier than you can imagine crazy can be, and they deal with it on a daily basis. I think we are one of the few companies. I don't know of many others. I didn't know you guys had a phone number. That's awesome. But I don't know of many where you can call and talk to a human relatively quickly. I watch my support team talk to people on the phone all day long. And with Salt, like and I can actually talk about something else in a second, but we were amazed by how many people had never bought crypto before that were buying Salt. So you can imagine the burden of our customer support. They are answering hundreds of tickets, I think a day sometimes, right? Hundreds of support issues. And these are people who are like, you know, sending Decred to a Bitcoin address, or they're burning their Salt by sending it back to the contract address, or they're like, you know, how do I, you know, it's like they're doing things that no like crypto savvy guy would do or crypto savvy woman would do, but it's like they're new to it, and that's what's happening in this space, and we really do see this as our biggest opportunity to be a competitive leader in the space is by actually caring about customer support, and that's what we're striving for. We're not perfect. We fall short. I fall short, but that is our goal. So if you ever do find that your customer support is falling short, you can email me at community.director@saltlending.com, and I will expedite your issue and I will address it. A huge part of my job, honestly, is figuring out where we dropped the ball and getting people on the phone and apologizing because we don't want to lose a single person, right? So that is, you can call us. Our phone number is on on our website. You can contact us through multiple formats, and we want to hold ourselves to that standard no matter how big we grow. So I hope we live up to that standard.
Total coin cap is something that that we often look at and sometimes have wonder about, like how is that reached and this sort of thing. So hopefully you could tell a little bit about that process and maybe a funny story that goes along with it. I'm sure.
You mean
the total coin cap? What you guys have? What 120 million?
120
total
million.
Salt?
Yeah. So I'm not sure what the question. Could you clarify? Just
Okay. So you have to determine whatever that number is going to be at some point. You have to say we're going to produce 120 million total, and it's not a number that's derived at without a lot of thought processes going into.
No.
And there's likely stories that are funny about how you might have disagreements about this, that, or the other. And that's what I was looking for.
That's a great question. I think really when we were having that internal discussion about how many of these do we make, like because you're making your smart contract, you decide the decimal count, you decide the ticker name, and you decide how many there's going to be, right? And so our biggest concern is that we would have not enough, right? And so because what's unique about salt is it's a consumptive use product, right? So we have, I don't know right now, we have probably what's that? Thank you. 63 million, yeah. 63 million in pretty much inventory, right, as a company. And then we have, I think, a little over around 49 million or a little under, something like that, in supply. So what happens when a customer uses a salt, they come to the platform and they redeem that for level of membership, right? So basic membership, borrowing up to $10,000 is one salt. They redeem that, and then we put it in inventory, and then it gets cycled back through, and eventually we sell it to the next customer. So our only concern was that we wouldn't have enough supply, right? Because we have an alignment of incentives to not like go dump $63 million on the market. It would just, tank it and there'd be nothing there. So, I mean, I guess there's a little bit of trust there, but we have an alignment of incentives with everybody else that holds it to not do that. And really our only concern, like I said, was to not have enough to address the demand of what's there. Now people would say, well, all right, if one salt equals $10,000 in loans or access to up to $10,000 in loans, how could you possibly address 120 million times 10,000? That's astronomical amount. But it's not just access that they're used for, because you can use them to buy down a portion of your interest as well. And that adds up a lot quicker than you'd imagine. And the amount of interest, if you're wondering how much interest can you pay with salt, is there's a spread between the borrower rate and the interest or lender rate, right? That's like salt, a part of salt's revenue stream. We expect it to be around, in between 1% and 2%. So that's the amount that you will be able to pay with salt membership. And they're valued, the value of salt, we don't base anything off the secondary market prices. So the value of each salt right now is $25, right? So that's how much of your interest you'll be able to pay with one salt membership, or one salt that you redeem towards interest. And there will be other mechanisms by which that you can, or other times, and there's limitations on this, but there's other things that you can pay for with salt. Any of our products and services, like our merch store, you'll be able to use salt at retail value to buy. But then there's also going to be certain types of loans that you can pay back with salt.
So earlier when you started the conversation, one of your examples of a lending example was like, say you had one Bitcoin and it was $10,000. Your example was like 70%. Later on, you said when we start, we're probably going to be super conservative. The lenders are going to, want to make sure we're good. So you said 10%.
That's not an example. I said 10% on the way, as an example. That was not. I don't expect it to be 10%. I expect it to be.
Okay.
When we launch, probably closer to like 50%, maybe.
Excellent. Okay. So my question was?
Loan to value ratio, right? So how much of the value of your asset can you get in cash?
So my question was, there could be a margin call if, for example, the value of a Bitcoin, let's just say it's 50%. So say your Bitcoin was 10,000, you lent it, you get to borrow 50%, 5,000. And let's say the price of Bitcoin went lower and you had to do a margin call, right? What if the price went to like 20,000 on that same contract, on that same loan? Could you borrow an extra 5,000?
That's a great question. Yeah. So what it'll be is you as the borrower, just like you have the optionality when price drops to do a, it's called, I think it's called a balloon payment, I think is what it's called. So you can either, if the price appreciates, which is like pretty much the bet, if you're leveraging it, it's because you think it's an appreciating asset that's going to be worth more. So let's say you're right and it does appreciate, you can either pull out more equity, add to that principal and get more fiat out, or you can pull some of that collateral back, right? So the whole thing is like people are used to lending being a very unflexible, kind of screw the borrower over paradigm. And what we want to say is if you harness this technology properly, if you see it for what it can do and how it's different, it is really, really, really good for the borrower, and you can give them tons of flexibility, and you can give them the ability to maneuver and do what they want with this asset. It's their asset, right? Or you could do nothing, right? And let it appreciate, pay back your loan, and then get all that back and all that appreciation. What's interesting is when we think that where it's going to be when we like are fully fledged, really churning, have proven the model, we think it's going to be around 80 to 85% loan to value ratio on something like Bitcoin. And different asset classes with different volatility, different market cap, different transactional volume have different loan to value ratios, right? Because if something is more volatile or has lower transactional volume, really liquidity is the biggest thing, then it's going to have a lower loan to value ratio. What's really interesting to me, what blew me away, is we're shooting for the best loan to value ratio possible, and a lot of our borrowers are like, I only want to take 50% because I don't want to have to worry about a margin call or a maintenance call. So actually our borrowers are telling us they're a little bit more conservative than we are, which is that's cool. That's awesome. We want to over deliver, but yeah, that's what would happen in the case of appreciation. Oh yeah, you gotta flip this on like this. Check.
Okay. I have actually two questions. Say I have put my Bitcoins with you. Is it going into one total wallet or is it a separate wallet for each person?
It's a separate wallet for each person. It's a separate smart contract for each loan because each loan has different terms, these variable terms. So like you're gonna want a different term length, and it's not pooled.
So what happens if that wallet is stolen? Are you responsible for it or me?
So yeah, I believe yes, you are.